All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pain Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones. Today, I'm joined by specialist massage therapist, body mind coach, and Reiki practitioner, Jerry Andrews. Jerry and I met on a Facebook page for SIRPA certified practitioners. SIRPA is the Stress Illness Recovery Practitioners Association, and the page is used to allow practitioners to connect one another, kind of a support group for healers. I wanted to interview experts in the field and find out how they are applying Georgie Oldfield's principles to their personal work. Welcome, Jerry. Did I miss anything?
No, that's great, Dana. Thank you. Hi. It's good afternoon, yeah, but good morning over there, I think, in the States at this time of the day. But thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I guess let's get started with what inspired you to become a massage therapist and how did you get interested in healing people and working with clients?
Right, right. Well, that sort of goes back a couple of ways because my grandmother was a lady from the northern states in Burma, in the Shan state. So she'd already been involved in some of this type of work, I think, originally back in the day. And I always remember growing up, my dad would always give us quite a vigorous head massage. And it felt like we were getting our heads pulled off, but basically it worked though. So yeah, I sort of grew up with all of this type of thing. Um, and it was also something that I sort of used massages and things, playing sport and getting injured and all that type of stuff, which you know too. Um, so certainly felt the benefits of having a massage, as throughout my life, I suppose, in that sort of sense. But I've also been always sort of interested really in what makes people tick, I suppose. And I suppose massage is a really interesting way of exploring how the body works or
And
doesn't, as the
what do you
case
mean
may
by
be.
that?
Say again?
What do you mean by that?
So I suppose it's just literally being able to explore what's going on in the body with using your hands, the palpatory skills, and knowing what's connected to what and what makes your arms move and so on, and what happens when it doesn't. So all that sort of stuff, I suppose the biology, I guess, anatomy has always fascinated me. So it led into me being able to do some training, some initial training here in Leeds, where I'm based in the UK. And then in Sheffield, I did a years long sort of diploma there and expanded really my knowledge. And that got me going in terms of thinking about this as a possible career.
And how long have you been doing this?
Been working now as a massage therapist for about 12 years now, I'd say. I started training back in 2010, 11. Um, but it isn't something that I've always done, um, but definitely something which I know I love doing now, and I wouldn't swap it for the world now.
That's awesome. Now, you said you had first heard of Georgie Oldfield's work when you attended a seminar. What
Mm.
motivated you to go to that seminar in the first place?
That was it's like a sort of a physiotherapy type of expo over in Manchester. And as a massage therapist, I've always been really keen to try and explore all sorts of different avenues around the work. So there was all sorts of different things there, like rock taping and blading and all sorts of stuff. But I always remember going along to Georgie's talk and listening to this woman who I didn't know at the time, sort of talking about chronic pain and how really what she was explaining was sort of taking things in quite a different way, almost away from the body and into the mind. And at that point, making the sort of connections between the sort of body and mind hadn't really quite sort of happened specifically. I mean, a lot of the training that I've done as a massage therapist is as a holistic practitioner. So very much about bringing the whole of you to the table, as it were, and understanding the whole person. But this connection between mind and the emotions and what's going on in the body wasn't necessarily a major thing at the time for me anyway. But hearing her sort of got me quite interested in, what's going on here. So that's sort of where I sort of started to explore this a little bit further.
Now, I find that
Um,
interesting because, to outside individual, when we're thinking about massage, we are like that does go in that other category, right? You
yeah.
have your medical doctors, and then massages. Like for me, it's part of that Eastern philosophy, right? Is that's what
Mhm.
you do when your doctors aren't meeting your needs. You go to a massage therapist, you go to an acupuncturist. I in at least in the United States, I think massage therapists are looped into that alternative healers
Yeah.
category, which to me means that the mind would be a part of the training, but you know,
Mm.
not a massage therapist, so clearly it's not. You know,
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, yes, a lot of the training that I did, as a holistic therapist, and the teacher that I had, Vicky Gorm down in Sheffield, was a brilliant teacher, and she's got a whole wealth of experience drawn from Ayurvedic practices and all this sort of thing, which we were able to learn from. So I was really blessed, I think, to have her as a teacher who was able to bring all of those aspects into the work. So very much, I think that holistic approach and understanding was already there. But I think it was the difference, I suppose I was meaning was, I suppose in the context of
mhm.
pain as being something that ordinarily is sort of recognized, I suppose, and understood at a physical level and
Right.
explained, I suppose, at a physical level. When you start to hear it being talked about in a different way, which is where the chronic pain and TMS and all of that sits, I think. I think that's the bit that was different.
That's good. So, how did you, with that, how did you implement that into your practice? Because I imagine you can't just walk up to somebody and say, come to you and say, I have a knot in my shoulder. And, you don't start with the whole, um, you know, what's been going on with your life and, those kinds of things. And,
Yeah, so it sounds a bit strange to go and have those types of conversations straight off, isn't it? But
right.
um, yeah, I suppose how I've been integrating it has been quite interesting, really, because I think what's drawn me to the TMS work and the understanding of chronic pain in this sense, it's always been something where I've been, well, it's in my sort of understanding and the knowledge, I suppose, that the
Intuitive.
mind has got to be involved. It isn't just a physical thing. So I've always been quite interested in things like tapping, EFT,
Yes.
and all of those practices too, which are addressing mental issues but through the body. So I was thinking, is it possible to maybe look at this in a different way and understand it in a different way? And so I think the work of SIRPA and all of this work that Georgie's been involved with certainly does lend itself to that. And I think it was having done the initial training with Georgie, and I'm still going through finishing level 2 now and applying it, I suppose, in terms of the certification anyway. What I am finding is that it starts to help you to have different conversations with people. And it starts to help me to talk to people and hear things differently. And I think what's really been helpful is by starting to help explain what's going on and the connection between our emotions and our thoughts and the fact that this could actually be creating pain is very sort of weird, I think, for many people who believe pain is a physical thing,
For sure.
which it can be. So this starts to get us into quite interesting conversations. And I think this is where what I find how I'm using it is being able to integrate it as a body-mind work. And what I do, I call body-mind coaching, because I suppose part of what I'm doing is it's a therapeutic approach. So it's body-mind therapy, I suppose you can sort of say, as well as coaching.
Sure.
But it's engaging people in conversations where we start to bring the body into the conversation. But also, I find it's about how do we bring the conversation into the body work. So
And
it's a
how does that,
two-way thing.
right? So how does that, um, how does that work for clients? Because, sometimes I know people will show up and say, I don't want to deal with that. I just need you to take care of the knot
Yeah,
in
sure.
my back or whatever. But I guess what is the best way, like what is the most challenging case that you had where, somebody was
Mm.
totally against it and then they kept coming back because I still have that same pain. And then finally they don't have the pain because they did the work with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah, you do get lots of people who are just looking for a massage and to ease the muscles and all this sort of thing, which it works beautifully for that. And there's all sorts of different techniques we can use, to do different things and for different types of issues. So I don't have a problem if people, only get it at certain levels, and but sometimes that's what it is, isn't it? There might be an injury or there might be a particular thing that's going on, which we can sort out fairly quickly. But I think there is a case which the person I'm been seeing now for probably, I don't know, going on for 13 months, if not more, um, who's a runner. She runs marathons. She's on her 76th or something now.
Holy moly.
Um, so she's, she knows what it can be like to be in pain, I suppose, in various ways. But yeah, there's lots of other stuff from childhood and everything else. Um, but it can be a struggle for people who, are literally feeling the physicality of it to themselves start to do the work to unpack some of the old stuff and to go there. And I think because our bodies, literally can be in pain, and that can take over people's minds, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes it's really, I don't know, people want to put stuff in a box, don't they, sometimes, and they don't necessarily want to address it, or they get to a certain point and that's as far as they can go. And it's not for me to start going around and digging into their stuff necessarily. That's not what I'm there for.
Right. But you have
But
to admit that massage is a very intimate um, situation. It's like I can assume that I can lie to you, but my muscles are going to tell you something different. And
yeah.
there it must be for you, it must be difficult to balance that with, childhood trauma and other things that may, come up as a result of the
Mm.
work that you're doing, even if it's not intending for that to be the
Mm.
result.
For sure. I think sometimes, the body talks and we don't always know what it's saying particularly,
Mm.
but the emotions are there. And I do try to, explain to people maybe how all this stuff works. And I think this is the interesting bit that I'm finding really is that quite often people are coming who've been in chronic pain and they've got all sorts of things going on, and they've probably been to see all sorts of specialists and consultants and this, that, and the other. Um, and then arrive at my door in a sense, almost can feel as if it's like a last resort sometimes, isn't it?
For sure.
Um, but I think sometimes people there are perhaps ready to then hear something different, because I think the medical world are probably always going to be trying to give you a medical answer, and that isn't actually what's going on necessarily. So I think if people are ready for that, then yes, we can go there. We can do a little bit more, we can explain a little bit more, and if people are prepared to do the inner work, then they are going to be seeing long-term results. But I think it's quite interesting as well, depending on the type of massage as well. So things like John Barnes's MFR, myofascial release,
Mm-hmm.
where we're working on the fascia and helping the body to literally unwind. That in itself can be the release that people need without even necessarily, understanding and unpacking all the history. And I think this is the beauty of the work then.
Do you work with therapists or any, do you have like recommended sources for your clients when you notice that they are leaning toward a particular direction? I know with my business, like, I do have my, in my back pocket, I do have my massage people and my chiropractors that work very specifically on, especially injuries, because that seems to be a majority of the people that I work with or have been injured in some manner, either torn something or recovering
Sure.
from surgery. So, but I don't necessarily have the same conversation with them because I think they don't always buy into this. Because this is a
That's
very,
interesting.
it's interesting because, like Dr. Jordan Sarno has been doing this since, he was a doctor when he first realized what was going on. So, for me, I grew up on the East Coast in the 80s, and I remember watching him on 2020
Right.
and not quite getting it, right? Like going, wow, that's really cool. And I could totally see what he's talking about. But because the noise from, the big, big medicine was always like, there's a pill and, whatever. So I find that even when I have the conversation now around that this could be something that's emotional or mental that is exacerbating the pain, right? Because we know the pain is real. They
Yeah.
still, like, the practitioners will go, nah, but his hamstrings are tight or his glutes
Yeah.
are, whatever, that kind of stuff. And they're like, but I worked on that and they feel much better. But then, of course, the pain keeps coming back in the same location.
Yeah. No. Really interesting, I think, all of what you're saying there, because I think that's that's so ingrained, isn't it? That's not just the training, but that's the medical explanation that often happens, a scientific explanation that's there. And there's all this body of evidence, isn't it, supposedly, that's supporting all the drugs and all the surgical interventions and all this sort of stuff. Well, obviously there's a whole medical world that's predicated on this understanding. So to almost turn it on its head is very, very challenging. So yeah, we're up against a whole host of stuff there for sure. But yeah, I mean, I
Anybody?
do have people that I would do work with. Sorry, who I do refer on to. So a number of chiropractors, some osteopaths who live locally, but also counselors too. So I think sometimes you've got it. It's really important to know your boundaries as well in the work that we do, because sometimes it can almost feel as if we can be everything to all people, sort of thing.
Yes.
And even sometimes with massage as well, isn't it? Some people might actually want a different type of person, and I suppose a lot of this is acting in the interests of your client, your patient, as opposed to your interests first, isn't it? And if it means you pass them on to somebody else because they might get better results, then that's in their interest, and that's ideally what I try and work from. But it's thinking what you're saying there about the challenge to the medical, physical, biological understanding of the body is also very challenging for us as body workers. And I say this a lot as well in some of the conversations I have and posts and things that I put up to even the massage therapists, because again, it can almost feel as if Sarno's work is saying, well, there's no point doing anything with the body because it's all to do with your emotions and anger and childhood trauma and all that type of stuff. Which you think, well, we know about that, doesn't it? Almost. And
Right.
so it can be quite challenging. But this is where I suppose my take on it differs slightly to the more traditional SIRPA training, where I feel, and again, I've trained as well with Laura Wick and the body-mind method work that she talks about. And I find integrating some of that is very much about taking a much more embodied approach to this, but literally using and integrating body work into the coaching, into the talking, because I think you can do so much up to a point in dealing with all the stuff, dealing with the childhood trauma and all of those sorts of things that might be behind things, or whatever the traumas might be. But at some point, I feel personally that, you've got to also be able to connect with it in the body. Oh, yes. And I find the body work that I'm doing helps to connect with that and helps to release that, because sometimes you don't always have the words to talk about this stuff, do you? And the body itself holds that. And if we find ways of working that help to do that directly, then I think that's really important to be able to do that too.
Yeah, and that's, it's interesting because the previous talk I had with a client of mine, for her, it was getting her back to moving her body, but then having that message of safety.
Yeah.
And, like you said, if you listen to Sarno, right, you just stop everything. And, sure, that makes sense. And, if you are the seeker, right, which is what happens a lot for people who are chronic pain sufferers, they're just always searching because the next big thing. And, like I had said in, previously, it's like if I'm going to you for massage and I'm thinking you are going to be the one that is going to take away my 38 years of migraines, right? Then I'm coming to you in a wrong mindset. Yeah. Because one, that's ridiculous pressure to put on somebody. And two, clearly something else is going on, because if it was just one massage or one doctor, one pill, then I would have been golden by now. But the reality is that it's not, and there's a lot more around it. But I think for us, like you said, because we are the end result, a lot of times it's after the physical therapy has expired, right? You only get, in the United States, you only get a certain number of sessions after a surgery or after a report of some chronic pain injury. Then you and I are the people that they go to. And for me, it's the message of safety through movement, right? Where you're the message of safety through touch and probably connection, right? You are realigning them with their bodies. You're helping them integrate and trust their body again. Because a lot of times if I, go in and, like I said, I'm coming for a cure, then I'm not really in touch with my body. I'm giving my body to you, for you to do something with it. But I think our approach kind of flips the script a little bit and says, I'm here and I want you to be a partner with me in my healing. And I don't know if that makes sense or.
Absolutely. And yeah, really resonated with what you're saying there about, how people are approaching this. Because I think the attraction sometimes of the quick fix solutions is that it is exactly that, isn't it? I can turn up, be fixed, and off I go again. And sadly, I think sometimes we see a lot of that being put out like that in terms of chiropractic and all sorts of other stuff, isn't it? Where it's just a quick fix, but you still have to keep going back for God knows how many sessions. It's not that quick.
For the next 6 months.
Yeah, indeed. But I think also what is very interesting with that too is that people themselves have been conditioned to expect a solution outside of themselves. And I think this is the whole thing about the medical profession, isn't it? We go to experts who will do something to us and we'll be fixed, we'll be sorted. like taking a car to the garage or something. You don't have to sit around and wait. You just leave it there and you come back and it's fixed. And some people do sort of, they zone out, don't they, and expect to be better. But actually, it's quite interesting. I've got another lady who's case in point, where she's had some chronic back issues going back through as a result of an injury and all sorts of other things. Well, initially, yes, as an injury.
Okay.
And she'd been seeing a chiropractor and all this, and he's fixed her. But she knows that she needs to maintain it. So I also, she comes and sees me regularly too. But what's interesting is that we've only just recently, and I've been seeing her for less than a year or so, just so. But we just started to get into the conversation about what's maybe sitting behind the chronic nature of what's going on. And there's lots of stuff. And we may or may not get there. I don't know. Hopefully we will. But she's thinking about it. But at least we've started to open the door to that understanding. So that's a good thing. But yeah, I think people do seek for something outside of themselves. And we see that thing so much, don't we, with the people that come to us. And as you say, sometimes we might be at the end of a long list of people that they've already been to. But people always seem to be searching for the solution outside of themselves. And I think it's when you start to have different conversations with people, and it's interesting what you're mentioning about, holding a safe space. And this is what I talk a lot about with other therapists, that, it is all about how do we hold space for people. And that can be without even doing any work, but just simply, being with them. And even, that's why thinking about the physical environment in the room, what's the atmosphere that we can create in the room that we're working with people in itself can be a big deal.
Well, and I also think that we hold space in a different manner. And I think you and I spoke about how the systems are very similar to, United States, UK, in terms of you have 10 minutes with your primary care provider. And so if you don't have a list, or, you don't talk rather quickly, you're not going to get your needs met by this person. And generally what they're going to do is make an assessment and, write referrals or write prescriptions for medications and then send you on your way, where you and I are with people for a period of time. And so through that time, we build relationship, and, and you make adjustments. I mean, how you handle client A is going to be very different than how you handle client B. And I don't believe that doctors are necessarily given that flexibility, and it's the system. For sure, because I don't think that a doctor goes into being a physician and deciding, I'm going to be a crappy doctor. I'm just going to run people through on a treadmill, and I'm going to be amazing.
Yeah. They get this stuff, they really do. But the system itself doesn't allow them to be the doctors that they know they want to be. Yeah.
Right.
But having said that, I think there are some doctors as well who are very, scientific and very clinical, literally, in their approach to things.
And, we need those types of doctors too, because those are the ones that, will solve cancer or, do something different. And I don't know, maybe they just don't need to be with patients, and that's kind of harsh, but more often than not, I've heard that I try to speak with somebody and they're not listening to me, and they don't hear me or don't give me the time, and I'm not feeling heard. And I think that's where you and I, where that's part of who we are, is that because we've chosen the professions that we've chosen, we are well, actually you, right? Not me, because I've had people come to me that have been to other personal trainers who scream and abuse them and whatnot. And
Right.
And that is not who I am as a trainer, because I do want to hear what makes you tick, because then that's how I get you from A to B. Um,
Okay, interesting, interesting.
I,
So you're a personal trainer really in terms of what you do with people.
right.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's initially why they come to me, right? Is that they want to lose weight, or they want to get strong, or whatever it may be. They're recovering from a surgery, those types of things. But one, I can't handle everybody the same, because there's also different levels of emotionality that are attached to these things. So for instance, if
Mm.
somebody's coming to me to lose weight, if
Mm.
they've been heavy their entire life, they're not coming to me to, it's, unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen. I'm not going to be the one that's going to get you to lose weight, because you already know the things, right? If
Right.
you've been heavy all your life, you know the programs, you know the diets, you know the types, how you should be eating and what you should be eating.
Right.
um, but I can, at least in my, way, is I can make you feel good about who you are and allow you to get
Yes.
stronger through that process. And
Well,
then it's
that's
possible,
coaching.
right? It's, yeah, and that's definitely, I mean, it's definitely coaching, but you can't be a good coach if you don't listen first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Spot on. And I think actually it's interesting, really, what you're saying there, because I think this idea of coaching is a fascinating subject, which I think in our world, as people who are working with others in terms of healing and so on, still is a fairly new term over here. I think you see on LinkedIn, don't you? Everybody's a coach now of some sort or other. Yeah, and I think it's either because you've tried to do other things and you want to share your expertise. But even there, I think that's another problem where people who are keen to give advice and to guide and to instruct and so on think that that's coaching, but that also isn't coaching either, isn't it? That's more consulting, I suppose you can say. But yeah, I think where we both share, I think a lot of this is in the idea of being able to take somebody from being in one position towards where they want to be, but they at least they're starting with some idea of where they want to go. But I think sometimes, and I don't know whether you see this with your patients, your clients there, whether people are coming to move away from a problem, but don't always have a clear idea of what they want to move to. You see what I mean?
Oh yes, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's always it.
Right.
Right. I mean, at least for, in the fitness training world, right? It's always about transforming themselves, right? And they know they want to be a certain way, or they've
Right.
got,
Right. But that was my point in a sense is do you find sometimes the people that you're seeing, it's more about what they don't want to be,
oh,
or
yes.
do they have a clear idea of what they do want to be, and that's their target? So they've got a more of a proactive mindset, if you see what I mean.
I would say probably about 80% of my clients have that they do know what they want.
Oh,
They
okay.
their goals set. There's that 20%, and generally the 20% doesn't stay with me, because they
Right.
show up and they want me to do something, and it's about what I can provide for them in terms of, again, that
Right.
force, right? Forcing you to
Yeah.
do something, and they're not really on board, right? But they, like you said, they're kind of stuck in that Netherland, right? Where they can't go back. They don't want to go back to what it was. They don't know
Yeah.
how to move forward. So they're coming to me to shove them in a direction.
Yeah.
And I can't do it without them.
Yeah.
It's, I don't want to, I'm not essentially, I'm not really your parent, right? Can't make you, go out and exercise more, or, not
You've
eat.
got to want to do it as well, isn't it? There's got to be
Right.
some motivating factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's been a challenge for me over the years, because, I have had people come to me, and, they've been friends, and it's been very awkward, because it's like, well, if you're not on board, then I can't work harder than you.
That's a very good point. I think people expect you to, because that's part of the issue as well. I don't know whether you find this, but the challenge can sometimes feel like, people are paying you, so you've got to perform.
Sure.
And it feels as if you're the one who's got to do all the work, and they can just sit there and receive it, isn't it?
Right. Well, the good thing is that, with doing the pain work, that's a very different,
Mm,
it's very different than the personal training that I
yeah.
do, because it definitely feels like in partnership.
Yes.
And I enjoy that. I mean, that definitely feeds me, I think, more than just the fitness training. Like, I enjoy the training, and I love watching people go and do events and have good success or not feel destroyed after, running a marathon or those
Yeah.
types of activities. But the pain stuff is cool because when you see somebody who is absolutely terrified to move, and I can't do X because it hurts too much, and you get them to the point where they can do it, and then it's almost like igniting a fire, because once they do it with me and they have that safe space, then after a while they don't need me. Like, and that's the thing, is
Mm,
that a lot of my pain clients don't come back. Like, once we do the work, they get really super excited and they take off on their own. So it's not like
yeah.
they keep coming to me for strength
Yeah.
training or anything like that, because generally they were probably kind of active people to start off with, and then they just ran into this roadblock and
Mm,
just needed somebody to pick them up and hear them and help them work through their process.
mm,
And then they're all cool.
mm.
Thanks for the hand up. I'm gone now. And,
Yeah.
and they take off. And that's good,
Yeah.
because I don't think that I'd want like a whole clientele of pain clients, right? Because, well, and as somebody who is a chronic pain sufferer, sometimes you take on their stuff,
Yeah.
and it becomes,
Yeah.
and I imagine you have the same thing. Like, if you're dealing with somebody who's very emotional or is very angry, I mean, how do you take care of yourself so that you're not going home and going, oh, I have
Mm,
the crick in my
mm.
neck, or, oh, my
I
hip.
know who that pain in my neck is then. Yeah. No, no, very good question. I suppose I've been getting better at
Mm,
letting go of their stuff, if you know what I mean.
right.
So I think part of the method that I use in terms of working with people, and as part of the sort of the coaching aspect of a lot of this, it is about maintaining contact and being in touch with people in between sessions, because I try and work with people that in a container. We talk about holding space, but for them as well, I think this idea of having a program as a container within which we can work is helpful. Um, but the way that I suppose I then feel I can leave a lot of that behind is knowing that that's their container. And while I'm in it with them, then yeah, great, we're doing the work. But once I step outside of that, that's their stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of getting better at being a bit selfish, I suppose you can say,
Okay.
and not wanting to save everybody as perhaps I used to do. So in one sense, yeah, while I'm there with them in 100%, while we're in the container, whatever is going on is their stuff. So I try not to let it, to take it on board and become my stuff. So, and sometimes, yeah, to the point where I'm thinking, blimey, I remember who, who that person was now after not seeing them for a little while.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
I
you get
Yeah, I was
overloaded
asking you
sometimes.
about that and what you were doing, because it was funny. I was talking to somebody the other day and they had shoulder pain. And like, I don't know. I must have I'm been tired. So I think it's funny, but I got home and I was like, "Holy, my shoulder hurts." Does your
Yeah.
shoulder really hurt? Or
You can take it on, can't you? Yeah.
and it's like, I didn't even work with the kid. I just talked to him about it, and I was like, wow, we're in a, you're a spongy state right now. So, that's, we have to kind of sit down. Like, for me, it's like the number one thing is showering, you know,
Right.
that really of just kind of, going to the literal and like cleaning your body off and washing
Yeah.
off the stuff, is, and I
Yeah.
try to do that every time just so that I'm not taking on whatever you got going on. And then I journal about it too. It's like,
Mm,
so has their
mm,
pain in their ankle, and and I really feel badly for them, but I know that they're going to end up on the right side of this, and and have to get rid of it, because there is that codependency uh,
yeah.
that could
Yeah.
happen as a result of being somebody who's working with others. And
Yeah.
you have to you have to kind of clean yourself of their stuff, and just know and have faith, right?
Yeah.
Um, they have their own belief system, and they have their own support system as well, so they don't
Mm.
necessarily need to depend on you for everything.
And I
um,
think, yeah, we've got to not teach people, but we've got to encourage people to develop their own sense of themselves, isn't it? Sometimes, yeah, I think some people do want to have that type of relationship where they feel that there's somebody in the background who's always going to be there, type of thing. So that can be tricky sometimes to navigate and sort of, push back on. And that can be quite tricky, I think, as a practitioner too, isn't it? Because you sort of think from a business perspective, great, you've got somebody who's going to be constantly knocking on your door.
right.
But yeah, you've got to work that one out, I guess.
Boundaries.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Boundaries. So I obviously can talk to you all day, because so
It's
like
great. We're just having a conversation. I love this.
um what advice, for our
Mm,
listeners, what advice would you give somebody who's considering massage therapy as a treatment option for their chronic pain? Like, what kind of mindset
mm.
would you suggest that they bring to the treatment so that they could be a partner as opposed to a recipient of your knowledge?
Right. Um, I think for a start, it's perhaps being able to approach this with the mindset that I've got to do some work too on myself. And the massage therapist is a facilitator, a guide in this process, maybe, as opposed to the solution, the guru, that type of thing.
Hmm.
So I think being being motivated by wanting to understand yourself first is always a starting point, I think. Um, and I think also, maybe looking for the right type of therapist too. And I think sometimes you do have people who perhaps might have less of a holistic understanding and approach to their work. So not all massage therapists do what I do, for example, or work from the same base. So it's important to feel out a few people and take some soundings as to how they're working and what their understanding of this stuff is. Um, so yeah, I think it works both ways. You need to work with the right person, but also be prepared to do the work as well.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
And
you for having
it's fun. I like talking to you.
me.
Anyway, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening to the Pain Free podcast. Please rate and subscribe so that you do not miss any future episodes. And I will put all of Jerry's information in the show notes so that you have a way of contacting him, especially if you are a UK listener. And then, yeah, that will be it. So,
Or just say as well, can do if people do want to connect with me over in the States via Zoom, we can do some work that way too. So
fantastic. All right. So,
cool.
what would be the best way for them to contact you? Is it email?
Email or yeah, go on my website. There's a contact page there too, and that's www.massagetherapyleads.com. Or else you can find me on Facebook, and recently started on Instagram. I'm not a big Instagrammer yet, but or LinkedIn. So yeah, various ways.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.